Welcome back to the Heart and Science of Creative Leadership podcast. Today, we have got an amazing entrepreneur. She's a friend. She's an alumnus of Hill and Knowlton, Tracy Williams, who is the president and CEO of Olmstead Williams Public Relations in Los Angeles. Are the two things kind of stood out to me and things I really want to encourage people to listen for. One is around core values and how it kind of anchors what they're doing. And then the other is this point about asking for the business. I mean, Tracy is laser locked on growth, laser locked on asking for the business. She tells an interesting story about asking for the business. So I think those are the two things I'm most excited for people to hear and learn from Tracy. Just a great friend and great CEO and great leader of her firm.
Yeah, no, I think she's such a dynamic speaker and engaging and an engaging conversationalist. To your point about ask for the business. What really stood out to me is her candor and willingness to be really frank about money. I think that is something that many people in our industry still dance around, and I think one of the keys to being a really successful entrepreneur is probably being able to not shy away from some directness about that topic.
Is that how we're raised, or is that the industry? I mean, that's a big question. Like, some people can talk about money effortlessly. Other people, it's like worse than bad breath talking about money.
Oh, Bill. There's so many layers to that. It's how we're socialized. It's what's considered to be taboo. There's a gender component to that, right? I think women are oftentimes socialized to not talk about money or advocate for themselves in the same way. Yeah. So that's a whole other conversation that we'll can
save
have.
That for later.
Yes, exactly. And to your point about core values, I think one of the things that really stood out to me is how she lives those core values. I would encourage everybody, and we'll put these in the show notes, is go to her website and look at how she articulates her core values. And we'll talk a little bit more about this in the conversation. And, how it shows up in things like, how she talks about transparency, how she talks about, what she would look for in a partner if she were ever to go in that direction. She is a solo owner right now.
Yeah, and the alignment around, but it makes it so much easier because we've talked about partnership is very much like in a romantic relationship. Partnership selection is that if you've got crystal clear articulation of what you stand for, it probably makes the likelihood of alignment greater. Yeah. If you've got that, because so many of us go in of, I'm a nice guy looking for a nice girl or whatever, right, as opposed to there's some standards. And that's what her core values. It pulls through the way she leads, the way she probably manages and leads our clients, selects clients, obviously their annual reviews. So I think people are going to learn a ton from Tracy, certainly around asking for the business, core values, how they use it, how they bring it to life, and also about partnership. So enjoy the episode. I think we're going to all learn a whole bunch from Tracy, our friend, learn about her methods, milestones, and mistakes along her journey of entrepreneurship. Tracy is the president and CEO of Olmstead Williams Public Relations in Los Angeles. She and I have had an opportunity. We're both alumnus of Hill and Knowlton, but we also had an opportunity to visit and chat over the years in Los Angeles when I was out there, which is Los Angeles, which is home for her. So, Aarti, anything quick updates on you and what's going on, or are you just ready to jump into a conversation?
I think I'm ready to jump into this conversation. I do want to give a shout out to the number of Angelinos that we've had on this podcast. And maybe we'll talk a little bit about why that seems to be this kind of a critical mass of PR entrepreneurs in LA. And
not necessarily a hotbed for PR. Some other markets might be a little bit bigger, a little bit stronger. Mm-hmm. So Tracy, we've, as I said, had an opportunity to visit with you. I have to ask the first question about your background. And so long before you got into the PR biz, you were what you self-described as a war gamer. What is that, and what does that mean, and how does it impact your public relations career?
It's very much a Washington construct. And it was just, I learned through friends that you could get paid extra by these consulting firms like Rand Corporation and the Beltway Bandits, as they were termed. And they hired smart young students who were history and international economics majors who were doing well. I was a scholarship student for debate. I got hired, and you could go out and you would be selected, whatever, you don't know what you were fitting into. But it meant that you had to really challenge and have a wide-ranging knowledge of maybe the Peloponnesian Wars, who the sides were, what were the odds, but you would get a briefing in advance. So I found it very compelling and intellectually engaging. It would be exhausting after 3 hours, but just like debate would be, or like doing a media training with a client would be. It's, 3 or 4 hours of intense thinking and problem solving.
And does that pull through in strategy as recent 2024? I mean, is that thinking? Yeah. Talk about that from the context of how you serve clients.
I think so. I think thinking is where it all begins. I mean, where I believe in AI. I believe in all the technology. I believe that we should be using all the tools that we can, but it all starts with thinking. And everything that we write starts with thinking. Reporters like Aarti, Bill, but sometimes young people coming up through the world don't understand that before you can speak or before you put your, start typing something, you've got to have a few ideas. You got to know where your direction is. And that may sound so ridiculous, of course, but that's what I run into. And sometimes my advice is to people when they come, I'm having problems with this. Well, let's talk it through. What do you think? It sounds stupid.
No,
but...
I was actually in a conversation with somebody recently about when you talk to practitioners, especially junior level practitioners, right, how tactical, right, everything is. And it's really, and part of it is sort of that's what they're living, right? But asking them to step back and think about the strategy and ask the why behind the what. That's right. Not always easy to do. And I'm just curious, like as an entrepreneur and as you are growing talent today, how do you help your people do that? Because for what you do, crisis and corporate reputation, that's so important.
It's always headlines. Mm-hmm. If you can think in a headline, which is just a sentence, but think in good headlines. There's a lot of bad headlines right now. I'm always correcting the newspaper. I don't know if you guys do that, and finding typos and 5 million sentence modifiers. But the truth is, just think in a headline. Mm-hmm. What's the one? What's 5 words we can use? Okay, 7 if you must. 9, but we got to have one sentence of what this is about.
Yeah.
And if you can do that, we win.
And as you're growing your team, one of the things we've talked about thematically is this construct that I have heard, this notion that in the industry, we've got people that are serve and respond versus lead and challenge. And there's this transition that leaders need to make, ideally, our teams, but also entrepreneurs, from serve and respond, high tactics, let me take an order, you want a press release and you want a side of fries, versus lead and challenge, which is that thinking, framing of the headline, designing the strategy. So how are you, when you're encouraging your team to think in headlines, how do you help them move from serve and respond to lead and challenge in client engagements?
I mean, it's almost like the lawyer training, right? You try to ask the right questions. I mean, we've talked about this before, Bill. I mean, one of the things that I think is so important for a company like ours, but all companies, to have kind of core values. And we developed some core values about 10 years ago. And I think people who didn't have them during the pandemic, when everybody started working from home, really struggled. But we've had these we talk about them at least once a week, and we shout them to each other when somebody isn't speaking or acting in a way that is aligned with our core values. And one of them is servant leadership. And I know that sounds like something I get teased about, servant leadership, but it's leading with a servant's heart. And that means that I'm never telling them what to do. I'm trying to ask them what they think they should do and how can I help them do it. And that's really my only role, not to tell them how to do it. It's how can I help them get there? Well, I just can't come up with the first, I don't know what it's about. Okay, talk about it. And then they talk, and it's like anything else. Where's the headline, Aarti? It's always the last sentence, right? So, you let them talk, and then you go, aha, I think you've got it. Go with that.
It was interesting because I remember when we were convinced that we were all going to start thinking in 140 characters and we were all going to start speaking in 140 characters when that was the Twitter limit, right? And I actually was really excited about that. And I loved when Twitter had that character limit, because I think people got very good at getting right to that headline. Right. And then when they removed that character limit, and we don't really have it, even like on TikTok now, you can do 10-minute videos. And I really think that discipline, there's something was lost when we moved away from that. Right.
I think it's a really good point, because I was hoping for that, but I didn't necessarily see it translating into the work here. But I'm 100% with you. It's like, limit me. Mm-hmm. because nobody is reading that much, as we know.
Yeah.
I mean, it's we can lament it, but it's just the case.
When I would get op-eds, people would, in our industry would write to submit to, when I worked at the trades, some of these were 2,000 words. And I would have to go back to them and say, do you think that there's an audience for this? Like, who do you think, and do you think the subject matter is worthy of 2,000 words? There would be an Atlantic article, about some sort of big investigative journalistic piece about like the Trump administration that was it was under two. I was like, if they can do this in 1,500 words, I think you can write about social media and,
Well, so for both of you, is
years.
that ego? Because I see that so much in the industry. I mean, Tracy, you talked about 5 words, 7 words, 9 words. You talked about tight concepts. Aarti, you're talking about thousands of words. Is the writer just so blown away with their BS that's why they do it? Is it ego?
No, they're lazy.
Ah, okay.
They're lazy. They're just lazy, and they're not good writers. And usually that same 2,000 word, how many sentence modifiers were there? Every sentence starts with a sentence modifier, and you're just like, you take the 2,000 words, and it's sometimes faster to just go through with your pen. I can go through anything that somebody hands me and hand it back to them without reading it. You just see where the commas are, and and then it's like, go fix that, read it to yourself, and then come back to me, and we'll talk about it. But
and explain, and really like not thinking about who your audience is, right? I mean, if you're writing for a trade publication, you don't need to explain why social media is important, right? I mean, we can cut out those 2 paragraphs, right? Unless it's 2007, I don't need that.
Well, the same could be true for how you pitch reporters. You can't go and pitch a reporter if you haven't read a few of their articles, know their beat. And so this, sending something out without at least having read something, you don't have to reference, you don't have to brown nose them and say, I loved your piece. Wouldn't hurt. But I mean, recognize what they cover and what they're doing. And that's something that I think has gotten lost. The people here, they're very good at that now. Sometimes I'll say, go pitch so-and-so, and they're like, oh, she doesn't cover that. And then I hand them the story of something that I just read. Maybe not then, because now we don't know what they cover, right? The biggest challenge I find in our industry is there's so many less reporters, and they're covering so much broader of a topic. It's almost like you just want to deliver 5 sentences that they can decide from whether it would be a fit and if it's smart enough that they'd like to move forward. And you've got a good lead for them. But it's so much more challenging.
Can we go back to something you said about core values and how you made sure that you had that, and that sort of got you through the pandemic? But I loved what you followed that up with, is that how you talk about that every single week, and how that's an active part of of sort of life at the agency. Because too often I've seen founders say, well, we've got values, we have a mission statement, but it sits on their website collecting dust, and they're not at all connected to how it feels to work there, right? And I think that's really that when you're talking about values and mission, right, it really comes down to how people feel when they're working. And I'm just curious sort of how you sort of get at that.
Well, it resonates with the employees. It all has to come from your people. So we have it's on the last, one of our last core values is one team. I hear them shouting that out all the time. So somebody has, somebody has a great team, has a great victory, and they're like, oh, wow, you did a great job. This is great. And somebody will shout out one team, and everybody goes one team, because nobody takes, you still give that person credit, but the whole team participated in some way. We talk about transparency. We call it radical candor, but however you want to term it, we've got to be very open and honest about everything that we're working on. And my favorite, which is not necessarily everybody else's favorite, is embracing failure. And we kind of have a failure meeting every week, fail forward. They like to rename it, but it's just failure. It's like, what are you feeling failure about? And I have it. I have feelings if I didn't succeed with this, and I don't know how to get past it. I've had this roadblock, and, I'm not succeeding with this, getting this new client, having a struggle with this. So I share, they share, everybody's got something that by Friday, you have a pit in your stomach that you have not been able to achieve an objective you had promised you would do.
Do that move into problem solving? Do you actually, so
yes,
you
that's immediately,
and then it goes.
That's all it is. Nobody gets to vent for long. It's like, I didn't get that pitch out. He didn't like what I was going to say. Okay. can you help her get to that with this and do it by the end of the day? Okay, yeah, I'm going to work with you. We'll get that done in the next hour. Boom, problem solved. So it's all problem
Yeah.
solving. So you say the thing, but you don't belabor it because somebody jumps in. I can help you with that.
Yeah. What's the if you can remember, what's the real story behind creating those core values? I'm sure you had a big planning meeting. Everybody sat down with a blank sheet of paper and said, "It's Core Values Day. Let's work together." How did it happen?
Well, yeah, we kind of did. I actually had a coach. I had gotten an executive coach by that time. It was a group that I'd worked with that was an executive coach for 2 of my clients. And so we ended up meeting that way. I got a deal, and they were really terrific. And one of it was, do you have core values? And what's so interesting is after doing this, it's become such a part of our agency. I mean, people here talk about them. They've got them memorized. They're written on the wall. We all know them. And because we use them as our defense, it's a defense mechanism. They're also, I feel like half the time the team here weaponizes the core values. I accuse them of that. You're weaponizing our core values. But they're there. We all use them when we need them. But what I also did is during the pandemic, I realized that all these companies that were now moving away from their offices were having huge problems. That became a business that I was delivering, helping them develop their core values. And the CEO would be like, "Oh, just give me your core values. We'll use those." No, you have to have the whole entire everybody there. You have to talk about it. It's a 2-day affair, right, Bill? I mean,
it's a process.
You're
and it's iterative.
process.
I could argue that it never stops. You get the 10 or so that are working for you right now, and they refine and they take on new meaning. And so, yeah, absolutely, it's a never ending.
Yeah, and sometimes somebody brings one up, or we discuss whether or not a one that we have, like we have one that's nimble, and everybody's like, "What is that?" And I'm like, "I love nimble," and because that means doesn't matter what happens, we're going to work it out.
So is there an ideal number of core values to have? Because I've sat in these meetings with agencies before, and I've seen them, they want to cram in everything for multiple stakeholders, right? They want to make sure their people resonate. They want to make sure clients resonate. They want to make sure prospects, right? And to the point where you end up with this unwieldy list, and you don't really know from these 20, right, how many of these actually matter and how many of these are actually going to inform the agency's, culture.
Yeah. No more than, I think it shouldn't be any more than 6. Could be up to 10, but we really were dedicated to staying to 6, something that we could recite in a sentence quickly. And if we couldn't say them, like if I walk into somebody in their office and say, "What are the core values?" They can tell me the core values. And they're short. Yeah. Like one team. One team, that's not going to mean something to anybody outside of us, but it means a lot to us.
And it's frustrating when I see them, is that a core value is around integrity. I mean, that is such table stakes, and what a waste of a cell.
Yeah. You mean you wouldn't have integrity?
I have a choice. I didn't even know that was a choice nowadays.
We are not thieves. Oh, okay.
Yeah. So you talked about servant leadership. I want to throw a provocative idea at you around servant leadership, because we all use it. I like it. But I also want to talk about prioritization of you, prioritization of the principle. And so the parable would be, put your own oxygen mask on first before you serve your child next to you or take care of somebody next to you. Right. So how do you be a servant leader and take care of yourself? Because the business needs you operating at a high capacity to thrive and grow and win business, which we'll talk about. But is that a juxtaposition, being a servant leader and putting your own oxygen mask on first and prioritizing you?
Yeah, I know. You're always supposed to put that oxygen mask on first, and I don't.
Do you pay the price?
So
do you pay the price for that?
I'm in LA. So what do we do? I do ballet bar. I do Pilates. I do a lot of yoga. I know that I walk every single day with my dog and my husband. I wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning. I prioritize my reading and that contemplative time. So that's more hours, right? I'm doing a lot. But I'd say that's my oxygen mask, if anything, because once I hit the office, and I'm the first one here and the last one to leave, it is really much about how can I help them do their job? Because these people are working really hard for this company. And I'm a huge beneficiary of that. So I feel it's incumbent upon me to make their lives better every day, that they walk out and they're happy. And I hear them speaking with pride about working here and working together. So I don't know that I don't have time for therapy, but maybe I should be in therapy.
we all benefit from therapy. So we're just doing it on a podcast. Everybody can hear it.
Exactly. So
the working out is a big
Sure,
deal, you know.
absolutely.
I mean, I think what you described, everything you described, sounds like putting your like you're doing exactly that. And Bill, I mean, you've talked to many founders over your career. I mean, do you like when you ask people, are you putting on your oxygen mask first? Is that what they tell you? Working out, setting time for themselves, making sure that they're taking walks, spending time with their pets. Like what would be missing from that list?
So no, I don't see it all the time. I'm surprised. There's this hustle culture, bro culture of just grind it out, particularly newer, younger entrepreneurs. When it's so acute is that when I see people in that 55 to 65-year-old zone of like, okay, now what? Okay, I don't have anything in my life other than this agency. What's my life going to be? And so I don't think everybody needs to be a woodworker, or everybody needs to have sailing or whatever. But I do think that we built these firms to be able to serve, obviously, clients, obviously our teams, but we also built it to serve and enrich ourselves and enrich financially. Not ashamed to talk about that, but also to enrich ourselves emotionally. We just hated the man, and so we decided to go start our own thing. And that's my case, is that I'm kind of a feral cat and sort of functionally unemployable. And so that's why I do this. But I think that, Aarti, I don't see it all the time. I don't see it all the time. And I see people.
I wonder if it's a male female thing.
Maybe there's
it's
a
male
nurture
female
part
thing,
of that.
because I had children. I have 2 stepchildren, 2 of my own children, a lot of grandkids from that family. So I have a lot of family, and those were always my priorities over the business, even for many, many, many years. Now everybody's grown, everybody's okay, knock on wood, and having kids and families. And I'm like just grateful for that. It's like, oh, as long as that's okay. So
maybe
for a woman it's different, because anything else was family.
I've got a 10-year entrepreneur. They celebrated their 10th firm, fast growing, nice public affairs firm, really doing well. And she's never prioritized herself. And she has paid for it with some health and addiction issues, paid for it in functionality. And when I kind of hit her with that abrupt stop of a question, she was quite jarred by it, and she's trying to figure out, what do I do about this? Now, she never got to a dysfunction, to a failing.
No, but it is true. You've got to have relationships, totally. And those interpersonal relationships, your spouse,
other owners. I advocate other owners.
Yeah, but I mean, just having a long marriage. I mean, I've been married 35 years. There's a steadiness to, it's not always perfect, right? But there's just you take care of each other, you take care of the kids, you take care of the family. And that's where you say if I'm doing that, it's good.
And I think there's a generational component to this as well. There was definitely an era where, I mean, I would be curious, Tracy, you mentioned you're the first one in and you're the last one out. And, and there was, and I'm just curious if that's the expectation, is that would be you, or do you have an expectation that if you're junior in your career, you're a few years out of school, that no, you're the one who should be there at 7:00 because you have, you have a lot more to learn. It's going to take you longer to do a lot of this work. But I do think there is a lot of pushback. And I think right now that people that are coming of age in this time where there's layoffs.
Work-life balance, baby.
Well, yeah, but it's like, so over the years, like that word has been quite charged, right? And some people have moved it to work-life integration. I think that's why there was so much pushback to, quote, return to the office after COVID, because people suddenly realized that they could throw a load of laundry in between meetings. And that meant that their evenings, they had more time for that contemplative time, or to be able to do bedtime without being interrupted. I mean, I think we're in this flux, and I think there's different people wanting different things. You have employers that are like, no, we want to go back to exactly the way things were. And you have people that saw a new side, a new way of living and working, that said, no, like there's a better way, right? And I think we're going to, I don't, it's still unclear where we're going to land.
I think it's going to keep, and it's always going to keep changing. We have, our people come in 2 days a week. I come in every day. And my people come in 2 days a week. And these are people who live 15 minutes from the office. It doesn't have to be that way. But, if they work, build their hours, and they're doing their thing, that's fine. But I came through where at Hill and Knowlton, you were there before your boss, and you did not leave until your boss left. And that was standard. And at Hill and Knowlton in those days, we had projects that would be gone. We'd be there until midnight. Sure. Young people doing projects, doing video projects or whatever, getting ready for the next day pitch. And we were the ones doing all the work because those guys didn't know how to do anything. They couldn't even, type or, so we did it all. And that was the standard. And that's how I thought that was part of our growth. I don't know that that's necessary now. When somebody smart walks in the door and they can write, they can be wherever they want to be.
I think the paradigm changed.
And I think we glamorized a lot of things in our business, like not sleeping, which now, like the research that's coming out that like sleep hygiene is really important. Like you are really, I think there's equivalent if you do not sleep adequately, it is like you are showing up to work essentially drunk the next day in terms of how your brain's funcking. So I think we have to stop.
That sounds right.
Yeah, right. And then the alcohol, right? Like, I mean, it was alcohol and coffee, right? You have 4 cups of coffee to get you through till lunch, and then you bring out the bar cart, around 4:30 to get people to stay until 7 or 8. And I do think that there is this wellness culture that is being, that's emerged, and people are pushing back on that. They're like, no, like for me to show up for that pitch, I need to sleep. I can't be up till 2 a.m. working on this deck. Like I'm going to go home and sleep. And I think that's a good thing.
But I like this bar card idea.
Oh God, no! You guys know, I have heard so many stories about the bar card, and it was not just the Mad Men era. Like there was a time where we actually had people coming to us when I was at the trades saying, if you're in recovery, like it's almost impossible to work in our business because there's just, I mean, I didn't know this, but some of the big agencies, you guys probably know from your Hill and Knowlton days, on Fridays or sometimes Thursdays, the bar cart comes around 4:00. And, it's just.
Well, that's what happened. Wes, my colleague here, he's our EVP. He talks about it all the time, and he's from a different era, and he doesn't drink. He's a Christian, and it's like, and he's conservative, and it's like, I was like, what did you do? He goes, well, I'd have a Diet Coke and sit around for a while. But that culture was not his culture, right? It's not fun. And then you're stuck. But
just going to point out that Google replaced all of this with, at one point, I don't know if they still have this because they've changed their culture so much, with nap pods. Because again, the science showed that a 20-minute nap in the afternoon did more for productivity than, expecting somebody to just, drink 3 cappuccinos at 2 p.m. to be able to plow through. So I think we got to follow the science, I think. And I hope cultures, especially in our business, are sort of, we're changing and evolving around that.
Well, do you think we're leading in that? I mean, I feel like we might be, that our agency culture might be leading in that. You say no, huh?
Aarti, no, I don't think so. I think we're followers.
I think we're followers as well. I do think for a while there, I think this is changing. I think the tech sector was leading the way, right? I think the tech sector, Google in particular, at one point, they realized that women were leaving. They were not returning from maternity leave. They looked at their data and they said, what would make them stay?
Right.
And they extended to 4 months, like 4 months paid. And then they realized that men as well, then they changed it to parental leave. Now I talk to agencies and they offer not maternity leave, but they offer parental leave. So it doesn't, leave, right?
That's a good thing.
Mm-hmm. So I think the tech sector for a long time, I think to some degree, I think the management consultancies were leading the way because they wanted to retain really, really good people. I remember they would have nannies fly with you on business trips, right?
Right.
Yeah. No, I think they were leading.
We represented Ian Ernst & Young for a while, and that was very much there's such a culture, people first culture.
Yeah. So I want to switch to about you, Tracy. I know there's this parable, or not a parable, a great story you tell about asking for the business and winning the business. And so for a lot of us, back on what really sort of drives agencies. It's winning. Winning. Obviously the creativity and the whatnot is critically important, but it's about winning. It's about winning the business, and in particular, individual career paths are almost determined on your ability to win business. Why do people struggle? Your team or what you observe? Why do people struggle with simply asking for the work and simply saying, "We're your best choice. Let's get going"? Why do people struggle with that?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe there's some insecurity, or they feel it's rude, or it's too aggressive. And then I think among the three of us, we are all probably slightly aggressive, and I just want an answer, yes or no. And then I learned the power of yes or no. And I'm fine with a no. And I tell people that no that's a fine answer. Give me the no. But I'd rather have a yes. But you have to make a decision.
So is that fear? People are fear of failing. If I don't ever ask,
I think it might be fear.
I never.
Yeah, maybe they fear they don't want the no. And as soon as you can be comfortable with a no, then the fear is gone.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so what I'm always looking for, I'm looking for a no, not a yes, which is different.
So I have a question on that. So, I mean, I think, Bill, what you said, right? There's fear, right? There's a fear of failure. So for every time that you do get a no, or maybe earlier on, how do you come back from that? How do you develop that resiliency to not be afraid to ask that the next time, to ask for the business the next time?
Well, I'm a little bit like maybe a bro. They're dead to me. I move on. And I mean, they're not dead to me. I'll keep them on my e-newsletters. I put them I have a calendar. I put them in a calendar to follow up in 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, and 12 months. I always check in, touch base. How are things going? Hope things are well. So I do that with anybody that has given me a no. Those no's sometimes turn into yeses later on down the road. So that's fine, because they like to see that I'm persistent, or if there's an article I see, I send it, thought of you, this was interesting, you should have been in this, that kind of thing. So I just, move on. And the next move is, okay, now I've got to get another proposal out.
Yeah.
So that's one of the leading indicators of success in the business, according to what I've put together for my business. How many proposals? We have to get out a certain number every month. And that means I have to find a way to get them out, right? And I'm not just sending them out to anybody. So reaching that number. And so we talk about it, maybe every week in the team meeting. We're down 2 proposals. Anybody got any ideas? Have you heard of So we're working on that. So you have to have those numbers.
I want to go back to your comment, but I think Tracy, just pivoting off of that, are you familiar with LAPS? Leads, appointments, prospect, sales. And you can measure LAPS. And LAPS,
right.
LAPS.
That makes sense.
And measuring that. I think there is a performance component. I used to think, everybody should have worked for the yearbook and have to go sell ads. Okay. It's just that's just a great skill set of having the hardware store or someone other than your mom and dad telling you, no, I'm not going to buy an ad. So there's that. But there's also a performance context in around athletics, that didn't work. So let's try this, or I dropped that ball, or I missed that kick. Let's do this. So I think I think those are really important things. But the thing one of my coaches, because it was something I struggled with, is he said, this beautiful coat of comfort that you wear of never asking for the business actually makes you remarkably, impenetrable. It makes you a failure, but it makes you remarkably impenetrable if you never ask for the business, because no one will ever say no. But then you sit there like the prom queen that's afraid to get off her chair at the dance, and nobody asks them to dance. And so you got to get in there, sell some yearbook ads, hit 100 more serves in order to just be able to figure out to do that, because fundamentally we're selling solutions. And if the solutions aren't right, maybe they're not right for you. They're still really good solutions because we still got a business. Just get in there and keep going. And it sounds Pollyanna.
Well, it's embracing the failure.
Love
it's like,
that.
oh, okay. And, there's an old expression that I always love, about us as individuals. I'm not for everybody.
And to be okay with that.
And I have a girlfriend.
Right.
Yeah, I have a girlfriend who's on the dating apps, and I'll be like, "How did that go?" She's like, "Well, Tracy, I'm not for everybody."
I'm for
And I'm like,
somebody.
and I just
I'm for
love it.
somebody. My fingers are crossed.
I love that.
So I love that you're able to embrace that, because I do find a lot of entrepreneurs in our business, they do want to be for everybody, right? And they take it
Yeah.
really personally if somebody doesn't, if they get a no. And so
Yeah.
that's one issue. And so I'm just curious sort of how you've been able to kind of steel yourself against that. But a second piece is about that fear. And I think some entrepreneurs do fear that no, because that no may mean that they may have to make layoffs, or they're going to have to take a pay cut, or they won't, payroll is going to be tricky, right? And
Yeah.
and they don't want a binary yes or no, because they think there's a way they can maneuver that no, right? If they get a hard no, that kind of paints them into a corner. But they want to be able to say, well, what if I throw in this extra thing? What if we cut the retainer by this amount? Like, they want to be able to maneuver, so they don't want that hard
Right.
no.
Mm-hmm.
I think after you've got the no, that's it.
Mm-hmm.
And you move on, because it's never going to work out. And there'll be, even if they did end up hiring you, it's not going to be a
They're
happy
wiggling
thing.
around in the net,
And
and it just gets
okay.
worse.
It's good. I mean, I think no's are great. It's like, okay, move on to the next thing. And you have to be up for that and be excited about your presentation. You did a great job. And the no is almost never, we don't like you. The no is usually because they don't have the money.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the truth these days. So it's not personal. It's business, as they say. I feel the same way about talking about money. And one of the things that I've always been so comfortable with, I don't know why, but I love talking about money. And I say that, like you say it, as a mantra. And it's like, well, we'll sit down and we can talk about money. It's like, no, we can talk about money here, now, right now, with everybody sitting here. Let's talk about money.
What kind of reactions do you
And
get from that? And are there generational reactions?
Well, I think they're trying to preserve some kind of
Is
privacy.
that about salaries?
And I'm always like,
I make 100, you make 150.
no. No, it's about time. It's about the budget on something. And they'll be like, oh, well, we can do this separately. It's like, oh, no, let's do it in front of my entire team. We're all here together. We know it works. That's why you got this budget. If there's something else you want differently. And I have a team that they've got big mouths. If something sounds, they'd be like, oh, I don't know if we can do that. So I think we have to be open and talk about it.
Does that translate to salaries at your organization? Do you encourage people to advocate for themselves, and also maybe to share, to have some transparency around what people's salaries are?
We don't have transparency around salaries, but they may all know each other's salaries. But I don't share that. That's to me seems to be something personal. I say we are transparent about revenues. We're transparent about where we need to be. Very transparent about billings. A lot of transparency, but salaries, no. But at the same time, somebody once laughed and they said, "You're such a rube." Of course, they all know each other's salaries.
Yeah.
Are you transparent about profitability and what those margins are?
Yes. Yes.
Because
so they see it.
Yeah.
I mean, they kind of see the financials, and profitability. We had a tough time at the end of the year, and there was a couple of months that weren't very good, but they got something. So they know that they're lucky. Profitability doesn't mean that they don't get their bonuses and the things that they
I think
want.
it makes it easier. I mean, it's hard if you've not been transparent to be transparent, but once transparent and once you kind of get there, it makes bad news somewhat easier. It puts good news into context. And so I think, but for people getting over that hump is hard, but once they're there, I think transparency really makes a lot of sense, but it's hard. It's hard to do. It's hard to get there.
And some of them aren't even that interested in it. But now I have people here I have employees from 5 to 8 years. So I have a long duration employee base right now. So they've been here a long time. So it's just if they don't know, come on.
Why do you think people stay for so long?
Well, a couple of people were talking about it outside my office. They don't, when things are up and down, regardless, they have no fear of layoff. In a big agency, they've been through big agency layoffs. You lose an account. I have one guy here who says every time if we lose an account, he starts getting, an ulcer. And I always have to say, I'm not laying you off. We replace the business around here. And so I think that they just feel like, why wouldn't you be someplace where they look at you as a person, not a client? So that's what happens. But they'd had these big accounts. The account, fires the agency, and the whole team is laid off.
So that's a wonderful concept, and I love that. And I love that the team gets to own that and embrace that. Can you see a time where living up to that could be really, really, really hard?
I've had a couple times.
It's a golden rule that never gets broken.
It hasn't been broken so far.
Nice.
Knock on wood. I mean, really, knock on wood. I can't say that. I've been very, very lucky. I know, but I've had moments where it was close to that. But I told people.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, here's where we are. This could happen. I just want everybody to know. And actually, then they always know who it's going to be.
And I think core values probably helps a ton with that. That alignment around core values. On core values.
But once you say, as you said, Bill, once you're transparent,
you can't go back. No.
The genie's out of the bottle here.
Absolutely. Have your core values helped you win business? Can you point?
Yes.
You can point to that? That's awesome.
Yeah, they have, because we talk about it briefly in when we're going to a meeting and they'll ask a specific question about leadership or whatever. And we just talk about core values, and I can turn to anybody on my team and say, do you want to give them? And we can almost give them together and what they mean, real quickly. And then it's always, the great thing is we're one team, which means people in this room will be working on this, but the entire agency, we do operate that with all of our clients. Everyone knows who this business is. Everyone feels a certain sense of responsibility and loyalty to this company, to the client.
So how do you work? So with this one team idea, right, that you don't just rely on one person, there tends to be, like, the clients tend to usually gravitate right to one person, and that one person really ends up becoming indispensable, right, on that business. How do you keep that from happening?
I don't mind if they fall in love with somebody and they really, really want to work with them. The thing that they need to know is that all of the wonderful things that are happening because all of these other people are working on it. And typically, I don't know anybody here who wouldn't say, oh yeah, Sam did that, Paolo did this, so-and-so did that, when they say, oh wow, great work. And they say, oh yeah, but so-and-so did it. I think it's just a matter of not wanting to lie about anything, but we're always very transparent. We have somebody who's just really good at awards. Somebody who's, we have everybody's really good at pitching. Some of us are better writers than others. So we really go by the skill set.
Have you had anyone leave and start their own agency?
Not yet. I've had somebody leave and freelance. Sometimes a couple of people who had children and then took leave and then decided to continue but freelance from home, which is great. And I don't have anybody who's ever worked for me that I'm not still really good friends with and doesn't come to the parties.
Well, the reason is because, entrepreneurial thinking, I think that's one of your values, right? And a lot of times, we see this, and I think Axios just did a story about this a couple of months ago, right? That, at some point, someone who's ambitious, they, especially someone who's realized that they've built this client portfolio where they are the client favorite across the board, and they know that if they went and hung up their own shingle, that some of these people would follow them right there. So I wonder how entrepreneurs think about this.
Haven't had that. Yeah, I haven't had that happen yet. But I think you would see it, and you would navigate around it.
You see it in the behavior of that person in advance? What does that mean?
Well, if you see that the client, they're really building it. Let's say I see the person who's like me. They ask for the business, they win the business, the client loves them. Maybe they want to go out on their own. I don't know. I think I would address it.
You would proactively say, hey, Mr. X, have you thought about this, or some conversation?
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow. Yeah. You could probably go out on your own. You could probably do this. Do you want to do that? Or do you want to stay here and make me pay you a lot more money? I mean, I think we'd have a conversation if you saw that coming. But if they said, I think I'm going to go, but I think I would be talking, talking about that all along.
Do you feel like you're out of the norm on that? Did you look at your peer set of owners? Just that little facet?
It maybe, yeah, probably, but that's because I feel like all of these people are people that we are helping each other. And I want to help them find their path just as much as I'm trying to find my path. And maybe California did it to me, but I just think, why wouldn't I?
Yeah.
If you've got a rock star, I would say to the rock star, can I have you stay and be a rock star here? And you can run the company. Do you want to be the president? Do you know? And then if they say no, I want to go do my own thing, and be like, oh, bummer. Okay, well,
so
good luck.
Well, what about equity, right? So, I mean, a lot of times I've seen agencies give phantom equity to some of their star performers. I also know people have left because they haven't really thought that was substantial enough, or B, didn't. They didn't like the phantom part of that. That something? Is that a lever that you would pull? Why or why not?
Well, we give percentages for business that they bring in. So every month they get a check when the check from the client comes in. And so as that grows, so does their revenue grow. So
and that's beyond a base salary.
Yeah. Beyond the base. Yeah.
And that's reoccurring for the life of that business, or is it a one-time?
Yeah. So that was something where I had some confusion. So I had to get some reality about it, because somebody said, oh, you do it for a year, and then the next year you do half. Then I talked to some folks I know in private equity, some super smart Harvard types, and they said, no, it should be for life. It should be for the life of that contract. And they were very clear about that with me. And they were like, why would you do it the other way? That's like, why would you punish them for keeping the client around if it's an incentive-based payment? And I was like, that resonated. I was like, okay, makes sense, So I have some really great advisors, and I tap into, if I'm having lunch with somebody that's the smartest person, what would you do if you had this? And I get some really good advice, and I think it does make, I think it makes our employees sticky.
Yeah, that's that advisor, having a group of advisors. Is that formal or informal, the group of advisors? Do you get them together like a board meeting, or are they just people that you're...
No, I just bug them. I tap into them and bug them. And then they complain every year. Aren't they going to get a gift? Don't they at least get a coffee cup?
Subscribe to your blog.
So Tracy, we've had several people on this podcast now talk about how they could not have done this without a partner, right? And some of these serendipitous meetings and how they found their partner, and the way that they talk about this relationship. I mean, it sounds like almost a marriage, right? I mean, they sound like they are business soulmates, right? Like they complete each other in some meaningful way. You are doing this solo. So why do you ever wish you had a partner, or do you think that this is the right way to go?
For me, this is the right way to go. And I would have a partner if I found somebody who really was super motivated and crazy, a little type A like me. You need to be a little bit type A, and hungry, and, have that energy every day. So if I meet that person, I wouldn't mind having a partner. But as you said, I've been doing this 16 years, and it's hard to find that. Even great practitioners don't necessarily want to lead. And I don't quite understand why, but if anybody,
would you
match me?
Would you look for someone who was like you said, like a type A? Would you look for someone who was like you, or would you look for someone who was more complementary?
I would look for somebody who could bring business in.
So is that an economic decision? I mean, do you have a need? Do you feel like there's a need?
Always a
other
need.
Than the economic.
If you want to grow,
other than the economic, around your leadership, around tenure, around exit, things like that, to make that partnership decision.
Oh, revenue. It's revenue and exit. Yeah, exit is a good, that's part of where we have to go at some point. But it's really revenue, and yeah, exit would be great. Somebody who could lead the path on. But the struggle that I can see ahead is you find that you're still working.
Yeah.
So how to get out of that? Then that's when I'm going to be coming to Bill Coletta, and he's going to tell me how to.
Exactly. I need to think back. I can't think of a seasoned and tenured leader, who's 16 years, coming up on 20, that's found a partner in that phase, unless it was super intentional because they wanted to leave in 5 years. And so I'm going to bring in the
Right.
40-year-old to the 38-year-old, whatever, because I'm leaving. I want to leave. That's different. But for you to equally yoke at this point with someone, I've never seen that. And I don't know. I'm curious how that would work.
Well, it may not be possible, but if somebody could walk in with two big accounts,
that's a merger of
like
equals.
Aarti,
That's
you were
maybe a
talking
different
about
thing.
the person would
That's a
leave.
merger.
Yeah, then no, I have a lot more than two, so it wouldn't be. But I would welcome him or her to come in because I would know that they can close business.
Right.
And then you go with God. What do you need?
Right.
What can I buy you? What can we get you?
But for someone, I do think that they would end up being someone who is hungry and ready to start, like ready to launch something. And you would, I think they would probably fall in that age range where, they kind of had outgrown working for somebody else in that capacity. So maybe that early 40s. So, and maybe they would expect to be ultimately like your successor, right?
Running it. Yeah. Sounds good, Aarti. Again, you see anybody? Send them my way.
Right now there's a lot of people. You've seen what's happening at the big agencies, right?
Yeah.
They are just shedding people, senior-ish people, right? They're getting rid of entire layers of management, and I don't think that's going to end, right? So I think there's a lot of people that are, and I'm curious to know what will happen with a lot of these agencies. Will they end up partnering with someone like you who's more established, right? And maybe just sort of, as you kind of were looking to sunset.
This is another brilliant ideas of yours, Aarti. So that would be great. But I actually did look for a number two to be number one about before the pandemic. And I met some great people. And one that I really was, believe it or not, he's a fantastic guy, brilliant, so good at what he did. Anybody he met just wanted to work with him. He was blind, which that's different, thinking about how all of that would work. But they work. He had no problems, but he ended up going with a big company that had better
resources
for visually impaired. Yeah, but it's finding that one who's just like, oh wow, and honest to God, I had 2 meetings with him, and I didn't know he was blind until the second one.
Wow.
And it's not because I was stupid. It was he could track, and it was. I didn't even think about.
I wish that he had started. One of the when we have DEI conversations, and ableism is something that comes up quite a bit in our business, right? Because the demands that our business puts on someone physically, it's really tough for people that have any sort of health issue or even impairment. So and that made me think, Bill, we should find someone on this podcast, right, who sort of navigated that issue.
I told him I really wanted him, and I said that's so great. That would be great for business.
Yeah, it would honestly be.
He appreciated my corruption. He was like, "Really?" I said, "I can use that. I know I can use."
Well, it's a core value now.
Let me ask you.
The core value number 7.
Well, yeah. You would make a name for yourself. Even as an agency, I think we need more of that. Like we do need. We are. I think ableism is something that it's very difficult given the way that our professional services, right? The way that it's designed. I think that's why even the remote work, right? A lot of people thought there was a bias towards extroverted people and folks that are neurodivergent and working from home.
Neurodivergent,
has
it's so true.
Given them who just they can't be in an environment where there's so many things happening around them. I know we're going to have to wrap up soon, but I know Bill, you mentioned at the beginning about the EY's Entrepreneur of the Year.
Yeah.
And Tracy, I would love to ask you about that and. Tell us a little bit about how you achieved that and how it impacted the business.
Oh, so I was not an Entrepreneur of the Year. Sorry, Bill.
I thought you were.
We ran the program. We ran the PR program for the Entrepreneur of the Year program. Boy, Bill, that would be good. But we were one of the top 100 PR firms by PR News last year.
Okay.
Oh, no. We have a lot of awards.
Well, tell me about how do you find that awards and industry awards are helpful and beneficial to your business?
Yeah, they're very beneficial. I know for my clients, and we want to be going after awards so that for some people they didn't used to mean that much to me, honestly, but they mean a lot to my team. They get very excited when we go, and they're very excited when we won top 100. agency last year. People were so proud in the company. So they get very excited, and our clients, because we always have awards programs for our clients, I'm sure as you all do, and it's very good for the clients. It's good for looking for new employees. It's good for morale.
Mm-hmm.
It's good for the executives, and there is some media opportunity.
So do you guys
obviously.
invest
They're
in
winning
it? Do
some
you
awards.
invest in Olmstead Williams winning awards?
Yeah, it's part of what we do for
Yeah,
ourselves.
it's like a marketing
Sure.
tactic. It's
I
a
mean,
line item, if you will.
we have somebody who does that. We have somebody who runs, who does our social media. We have, I mean, these are all people that's part of their other part of their job. And we always talk about we're, 80% OW, 80% for our customers and 20% OWC. So every day we have to do something for the agency. We all do.
Okay.
And I have to do, I'm basically do all the business development, but everybody has a role in posting, coming up with smart things to say on LinkedIn.
So one issue that I've seen with this, right, is that a lot of agencies, especially, boutique agencies, they can't invest obviously in someone full-time that's not billable. But when you put it on someone's plate who is billable, right? I mean, it's going to be the first thing that gets dropped off when things get busy. It's going to be the thing that they do the end of the day, or they just sort of throw together because, because client work was going to always take priority, right? Winning new business is going to take priority. And when I was on the other side of this, and I was one of the judges, and I was, running these juries, there was such a difference between the award entries that came from agencies that had dedicated awards teams. I mean, and these were, they were just, there were some holding companies that I think just professionalized award entries that really set the bar. And then the ones that, you could just tell that, they had to tack this onto their week. And it was
a junior member who couldn't articulate the message. Yeah.
I mean, I remember being at an agency one time where it was tacked on, and I won us the award, I will say, but I was there on Friday night till midnight, right? Because I had and I sat there, and I remember the agency principal texted, they're like, "Aarti, you are not still at the office, are you?" And I was like, "This has to be perfect." And I did. But that's what it took. It took me having to be at the office till midnight to get this out. And
well, now at least you could be in bed on your laptop, but
yeah, well, now in those days I was actually at the office getting because that's when the final deadline was midnight Eastern time, I remember, and I was living in Boston at the time. But I wonder, I mean, how do you you said you've been listed, how do you make sure that this work is high quality when it's not going to be a priority?
So again, we go back to our one team. They're not, and you're not alone. So we're all working together. So that thing is due. We have a meeting every single morning, and we do a quick run through. We know what the awards or what things are due. Somebody's got to do this post by Tuesday or Wednesday, and that's when everything comes clean. I can't get to that until this. Okay, then you're going to have to pick this up. It needs to be done on Thursday. So the timing, the deadlines for all of the OWC activity are in stone. And if that person can't do it, that's okay. That's okay. Just let somebody else take care of it. Or the person will say, "I'm going to do a down and dirty job. Can somebody else do a review?" And I end up looking at a lot of this stuff too. So I am fixing things up into the last minute. So I may be at the office, reworking things. So, being a principal in a mid-sized agency, you're always reviewing everybody's work. But we do keep it to, you have to do it. It has to be done. So nobody seems to let it wait. They don't want to. It's got to be done.
Good. How do you define success for yourself, for the firm? How do you define success?
Money is, revenue. That's really big. And then it's having a good team to execute. And then 3, that we have clients who really respect and admire us, and they talk about us. And maybe I should put that first, but revenue is more honest.
No, I appreciate that.
Can I ask a follow-up? I'm going to start asking people this. So when you say money and you say revenue, what's your target margin? And I ask this because I think it's something that we need to talk about as an industry. I think there's I remember at one point there was, 15%, right? That was considered decent.
Mhm.
And I know entrepreneurs that they would never, I mean, they would not go below 30, right? And then people would say, well, how do you do that? How do you not run a sweatshop at 30%? And I had some that would say, well, you know what? Margin, that doesn't matter that much to me. I run an independent shop, So is there something that you consider to be a
So,
healthy?
it's funny that I don't have a number, but as soon as you asked the question, I was thinking 20 to 25%. So, but 30 sounds better. But
30 is hard. I mean, that's a,
but I
yeah.
don't have a number,
Mhm.
but I obviously
Yeah.
do, because if it was a test, first answer is the truth.
Mhm. Yeah.
So 20% is healthy and happy, and I do very well.
Mhm.
There are 30% years. There's times when it's really, really great. And I think a lot of stuff that I've been able to do in terms of benefits, though, really helped me and helped the entire team, because we have a 401k, we have a profit sharing, we have a lot of ways to accumulate wealth.
That's awesome.
And that's what helps me a lot, and it helps our people. And I know that I think we're one of the last boutiques I know of. People can't believe I have a profit sharing and a 401k.
That's awesome.
Does that seem unusual these days, or do you guys would know?
Having run the best agencies to work for on the trade side, no, but part of it is, the war for talent, especially, in up until the end of 2022 was very real, right? And
Right.
Agencies of all sizes needed to look really closely at their benefits packages, and we did see. I mean, I did see things elevate. I saw boutiques paying for entire where the employees didn't have a premium on their health insurance and things like that. 401k matches are pretty common. I don't know how much that's changed. I don't have as much visibility into looking at best agencies to work for data as I did. But I do see what the trades publish. And I mean, I think some of that, it's hard. It's like transparency, right? Once you roll that out, it's hard to rescind it, right?
Just like, absolutely.
Yeah.
The same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So Tracy,
Yeah.
so first of all, thank you for this time. This has been fabulous. It's
Sure.
such a wide ranging
Absolutely.
conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So
Absolutely.
answer the following for me. We're having this conversation 3 years from now, and you are ecstatic. You are happy. Things have gone amazingly well for yourself, for Christian, your husband, for the firm and your team. Describe that happiness 3 years from now if we bring you back on the podcast. Why are you so ecstatic and so happy?
If I'm still alive and growing, I think it's amazing at this point. My aspirations have changed over time, because I think it's remarkable that I've been able to keep growing, have these great people around me, have a nice business, have people calling me for work. I don't respond to RFPs. So we don't do their RFP business. So we're still getting business. So if we're still doing that, that would be absolutely wonderful. And if we find one of these unicorns that Aarti has promised to, introduce me to, and that would be fun too. But it has to be, somebody who's fun, has a good heart, is kind, and focused, and loves to read, and it's more of a thinking shop.
Yeah. That's great. Well, thank you for this. The time is so generous of you. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. I think particularly valuable around your core values, the way you're so true and full of integrity on that. I think that a lot of people can learn that, and we should stop rolling our eyes at core values, but actually own it and live it, because it's bankable. You've proven that strong core values are bankable. So thank you for that. And thank you for spending some time with us.
Yes.
Well, thanks for having me.
And I'm going to do a plug for folks to go, actually, and maybe we'll put it in the show notes, to actually read your core values, because what I like about them is it's not a lot of jargon. It's conversational, it's plain English. And I think it's easy for anyone to read these and grasp what you mean when you say things like radical candor or leading with a servant's heart. I think you do a very good job of explaining your values succinctly.
Well, thank you. It's on the website. Is that I can send you that, or you can.
No, I know. I'm looking at it. I'm looking at it right now. So I want to encourage. We'll put it in the show notes. But I think it's a great model.
Fantastic. Well, Aarti, next time you're in LA,
Yes, yes, I would love
come by, have lunch. We're in West. We're right. I'm across from UCLA.
Oh, Westwood. Yeah, actually, one of my favorite hotels is right there. It's the W, the West. Yes, yeah.
All right, you guys do that. Tracy, thank you so much. Let's stay in touch. Talk to you soon. Thanks, guys.
Well, that was a great conversation with Tracy, and I love that she, intended to become a lawyer, because I've heard other professionals in our business say this, that their intention was to become a lawyer, and the overlap that they've seen between what we do, right, which is persuasion, and what you do as lawyer, which is persuading, right? Um, and I think what she's built, again, we have another high strategy, what it sounds like a high strategy, low tactics agency. And I think we're seeing a common thread here that, you with the right ingredients, you can build a successful high strategy agency. But Bill, I wanted to reflect for a minute on what she said about core values, because that's something that's thrown around a lot. A lot of agencies use that as their differentiator, but I liked the guardrails that she put around that, right? I think she said you should have no more than 6, because she's not trying to be everything to everyone. In fact, I think what she said, right, is I am not for everyone. And having the confidence and the conviction to say that, I think would make her appealing not only to the right clients, but to the right talent. And even the way she articulates those values, it's conversational, it's easy to understand. There's not a ton of jargon where she's trying to appeal to, obviously, pretty much every possible constituency. No, I mean, she sort of stands proud in who she is, and she knows how she wants to show up. And I loved that.
Well, I think that there, a phrase that I love of riches in the niches. And then you think about Martin Luther running around tapping, his credo on the posts in London, is that I think a crystal clear articulation of who you serve, not core values, but how you serve them, which is your core values, is something that easily gets eye rolled. I bring it up to our clients. I bring it up both to them at a company level as well as a personal level, because I think we could have core values. They should be, the Venn diagram should overlap. But I think it creates so much clarity. It's almost like this ultimate membrane to run decisions through. If you have to hire or fire, how does that fit within our core values? Are we bringing this client's being maybe difficult or challenging or abusive? How run that through that membrane of core values. And I think if they're done right, if they're constrained, just like you said, that 6, I think that's when people use them, and they're not sort of some management consultant perfunctory exercise, but it's like rubber meets the road. It's no different than choosing accounting software, which you can't run a business without it. So I love what she did on core values, how she breathes it. And it's really very refreshing. And then a shout out, it was a coach that kind of brought it to her to begin with when she was sort of thinking about that. And she sort of had this sort of aha moment. And I think she's like, she'll never do another thing without a set of core values.
One of her core values is, this radical candor. And I think the way she describes is we are not the nice PR agency, and we'll push back on ideas and generate results. And there is an existential conversation to have here about our industry and people pleasing, and, being able to push back on clients in particular. Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that I think it's been an ingredient to her success. Right. Mm-hmm. Is being able, is knowing what she's, not only who she is, but also what she's not.
Yeah.
Right. We are not the nice PR agency. And I think that also gives us a North Star for talent as well. Right. I mean, when something does not sit right with you, with a client, or you're like, this is a terrible idea, knowing that you have the agency, the core values of the agency behind you when you say, you know what, I'm gonna push back on that.
Yeah, and it aids. And the other thing that just dawned on me is not only when you find yourself in a situation that immediately bumps up against a core value, so radical candor. You're in a client situation. Well, should I give this advice? Should I not give this advice? That's where the core value just serves you, prima facie. It's right there. But what the core values done well gives you a foundation for decision making on second and third order. It might not be, are we going to be transparent? It's like judgment calls and knowing that the agency's got your back. One team is another one of those values. So I think having those, I just finished a little construction project. Having the foundation, you can put anything you want on that building, but you need the foundation. And I just I've always loved good core values work, but the way she's personified it just makes everything easier. That then makes it easier for her to ask for the business. It makes it easier for her to make hard decisions. And I just loved it. Just loved it.
But I want to be open about the fact that there can be some tension in how some of these core values may show up externally versus showing up internally, right? So let's think about transparency, right? I mean, she talked a lot about asking for the business and just being really open about money, right? And when we shifted the conversation a little bit and asked about whether, how that plays out internally, it wasn't as clear, right? I mean, there wasn't the same level of transparency internally about how much people are being paid. And so, I think that's just worth chewing on a little bit, thinking about how your values show up externally and how they guide, your interactions with external audiences versus how they show up internally.
Yeah. And I think it's that foundation, and you can build and use it as a decision framework. Inside, outside, it's not a panacea. It doesn't run the business. You still need accounting software. You still need timesheets, if God forbid, if that's what you do. But you still need the bells and whistles. But gosh, it's so refreshing, and to see her use them so well.
Well, I mean, speaking of refreshing, right? I mean, her willingness to answer that question about margin, right?
Yeah.
Like, what do you consider to be a successful margin? And I think she said between 20 and 30, somewhere between there, probably 25%. And I think that's something that a lot of entrepreneurs wonder about, and especially if they're not entirely clear on, are they building to sell? Are they building a lifestyle? Like where should they sit on that spectrum, right? From margin means nothing to we're doing 35%, nothing less, because we're building to sell.
Yeah. And it's different vocabulary, but it almost fits into those guiding principles, is that if I want to have a 25% agency, or in years 1 through 5, I'm in hyper growth, I'm going to have a 15% agency. But years 5 and beyond, I want a 25% agency. It helps make decisions. Similar, a little bit different, but similar to the way core values help you make decisions. Having crystal clarity and not just sort of, well, how do we do this year? And you look at your numbers and oh my gosh, we're 17%. If we had not gone to those 5 conferences, we'd probably be 22% or whatever the math works out to be. But having clarity and using it almost like a dashboard or a speedometer during the course of the year, course of quarters, super value. We don't talk about it enough because it is kind of one of the best determinants of what you can, and also is a great measure of health, because you're growing, because you're adding on the expenses relating to the revenue. So I remember early on in my days of running the firm, it was all about top line. That's kind of what I paid attention to, because I was just spending to figure it all out. And then once I said, okay, yeah, top line's valuable, as I was thinking about my exit, it was really about, what's the remainder? What's that profit margin? And landing in that 20 to 30 zone is kind of where I wanted to be.
And if we have a second conversation with Tracy at some point, it sounds like that exit, that piece, is something that she's still figuring out, right? And it sounds like she's open to a lot of different possibilities, including bringing on a partner at this stage. And and I think you and I talked about this during the conversation, that we haven't seen anybody successfully bring on an equal partner at this stage, having run
a tenured owner bringing on,
a tenured owner bringing another. Yeah, I mean, I think what would be more likely, right, is bringing on a successor, and that sounds like maybe that's where her thinking is. But she seems really open, which I think that's really exciting, right? She's not set in her ways, even after doing this for 16 years. Yeah. She's open to possibilities.
Yeah. And I will talk to her about it. I am curious about that, is that, I think there is a sense of maybe desperation of I've done it on my own, but that shot clock is winding down and I got to pass the ball to somebody before the shot, or I got to take my shot before time expires. I'm curious if she was there, 7 to 10 years ago, if she would be like, nope, I got it. I'm under control. I don't need that. Now, as you see the sands of time going by, maybe there is, to your said, more courageous openness. to that partnership.
Yeah. I mean, and it's courageous to go at this alone. I mean, how many people have we spoken to that said they would not have done this on their own, right? They would not have. Yeah. And so I think there's a lot of courage in sort of going on the journey that she's been on. Well, I think that wraps up another episode of Heart and Science, another exciting conversation. We'll be back with more entrepreneurs on their journeys and learn more about their milestones, mistakes, and methods.